In part 1 of this series, Barrister Bobga Harmony Bobton told us how the lawyers came to be the initiators of this present uprising, how the teachers and others came to transform it from a lawyer's argument into a mass Southern Cameroon's movement for restoration of independence. In this second part of the series, I focused on questioning the lawyer to solicit explanations of the issues from historical perspective to legal and personal understanding. I have just a follow-up question, okay?
Okay.
And this question is, from what you're telling me, it looks like a long, well-planned and executed plan to make Southern Cameroons disappear.
Yes.
I've heard you in another context say that while the people of Southern Cameroon thought they were going into a union with a union of equal partners to La République was coming to reclaim their lost territory. And as you've been talking, I've been thinking that it is that mentality of reclaiming what is theirs and bringing it back home and reteaching the prodigal son or prodigal daughter on how to be part of the family that they're going through. Can you expand on something on that particular topic?
Yeah, you know, there are many factors that influence influence the run up to the independence of Southern Cameroon. The very first thing is that the Western world was scared of the implantation of communism so deep into the West, because the whole of West Africa was essentially under the control of like major countries like Nigeria and Ghana, Sierra Leone, you know, Senegal. They were under the control of the Western powers. And even in the Central African sub-region, where the French had all this Gabon, Central African Republic, and Congo, Brazzaville, right up to Mombasa, and even in Northern Africa, there were no communist states there. Because the UPC in East Cameroon was pro-communist, and after they had been crushed by the French in the La République du Cameroun, most of them took refuge and were accommodated in Southern Cameroon when we had internal self-government. And Tumaza was now the front for re-emergence of the UPC agenda. So they didn't come up with a UPC in Southern Cameroon, they came up with One Cameroon, which essentially was a repackage of the UPC political philosophy. The fear of the pro-socialist movement of UPC clothed in a new name as One Cameroon made the members of the United Nations, especially the Security Council, to say it will never happen. Southern Cameroon cannot emerge as a socialist country. And how are they going to do it? They did their maths and they said, we don't give them access to full independence. So we give them an option to join either Republic of Cameroon that was independent since 1st of January 1960, or the Federation of Nigeria that became independent on the 1st of October 1960. This way, the element of socialism will be overtaken and neutralized either way. This was their man. Then, the British also had a private agenda. They had had the opportunity of using a professor of geology from University of Witwatersrand in South Africa, who had carried out a survey, a mineralogical survey of southern Cameroon, and told them that apart from Zaire, this was the richest, the next extremely rich country or territory in the whole of Black Africa. This explains why the Brits decided to sponsor Ndeli and join his Ndeli's party with that of Nnamdi Azikiwe, the NCNC, National Congress of Nigeria and the Cameroons. The idea was that without being seen to have put their eye on our resources, they would simply just package us into the Nigerian Federation and exploit it from the federal level. When that wouldn't work, they said, okay, you are between the devil and the deep sea. They said, France, you can take them. We can settle in another area. That is the reason why they use language that had no concrete constitutional committal. That, oh, we are willing to be with our brothers, and so on and so forth. When in the plebiscite, Southern Cameroons voted that they would like to accede to independence by joining the Republic of Cameroon, they said, we got it. Look at the way the statement was couched. You will ask the two alternatives: accession to independence by, that is passing through, joining either La République du Cameroun or Nigeria. Very, very clear grammar tells me and any other honest person that the joining had to precede the enjoyment of independence, but which is a contradiction of the whole philosophy and terms of reference of the Trusteeship Council. Because it ought to be, you accede to independence, but you are bound to join either the Republic of Cameroon or Nigeria based on the plebiscite results.
So by that, you're saying that Southern Cameroon never had independence?
Of course. Southern Cameroon has never had independence, because when once you have joined, you are going to get independence somewhere. So they are telling you that there is no independence air within Southern Cameroon. Mm-hmm. But if you enter the house of La République du Cameroun, you can breathe
their independence.
Their independence. If you join Nigeria, you can breathe their independence. So if you enter a man's house and you are breathing independence from him, he can determine what quantity of independence oxygen you have.
So basically, the terms of the trusteeship were never...
They were contradicted. And this, of course, this of course was manifested when the results of the plebiscite were taken to the United Nations Trusteeship Council for vote and eventually for approbation on the floor of the United Nations General Assembly. You will realize from the vote tally that while most of the other countries that were eager to end colonization voted, but for Mali, all French-speaking African countries, including France and the newly independent Republic of Cameroon, they voted against Southern Cameroon's expression of a desire at the plebiscite to enjoy independence by joining the Republic of Cameroon. If you interpret that on the face of it, and that is my case theory, on the face of it, it means that the Republic of Cameroon rejected our joining them. So if they rejected our joining them, the question is, what is it? What's their interest in our territory again? But this is the flip side of it. You know, like the coin that has two sides. Every case has two sides. If I were, as a true Southern Cameroonian, to play the devil's advocate, and I said, let me argue this thing from the point of view of my opponent. The idea of voting against the accession to independence of Southern Cameroon by joining the Republic of Cameroon, coming from the Republic of Cameroon and its allies, was a political statement. That how can I be voting to support an expression to join me when I know that you're already part of me?
But let me ask you though, how could you, okay.
And let me just clear this before you take the next question. By this I mean the concept of Cameroon in the mind of France, of Southern La République du Cameroun, as directed by France, was that the French Cameroon was a restoration of German Cameroon. And we have debunked that in our arguments by saying that there were a lot of satellite territories that were part of German Cameroon. And we consider that the cumulative effect of the defeat of Germany in the First World War and in the Second World War was a definitive liquidation of German possession. Otherwise, if they want to go into the theory of restoration of German Cameroon doggedly, then it should be restored and given to Germany, not to France. So here we are. The people simply had an expansionist policy and they were willing to assimilate Southern Cameroon. So it plays out on the 30th of September, the eve of the date slated for emergence to independence of Southern Cameroon, for Southern Cameroon's emergence to independence. How did it work out? As soon as East Cameroon was independent, well, the Republic of Cameroon, La République du Cameroon became independent, Britain was one of the first to post their ambassador there. And he was charged to seal the deal that had been struck between Champs-Élysées and Buckingham Palace over Southern Cameroon. That is to say, the normal legal procedure in liquidation of an agreement, particularly in this case, a trusteeship agreement, was never respected.
Let me ask you, the two questions I want to ask you.
Yeah.
One is, because obviously the UN 76B was never fulfilled then.
It was never fulfilled.
Okay, so can the people of Southern Cameroons, do they have a redress? Can they have a redress of that situation through the UN, or is there any other authority that can redress that through?
I think there are possibilities, just as much as there are almost insurmountable challenges because of the politicization of law at international level. And let me say this: the Southern Cameroon's independence, having been compromised in the crudest manner, gives the best case ever for success if it is taken up. But how did they do it? Southern Cameroon is not a member of the United Nations nominally. And the statute of the International Court of Justice, which is an organ of the United Nations, does not accommodate strangers to the statute of that court introducing cases there, except the right on the wings of a member of the United Nations who has access to the International Court of Justice. And this is what we tried with the Abuja High Court judgment. Because we took an originating summons for interpretation of various international conventions, including the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, as well as the UN Conventions on Human Rights, to demand that Nigeria has a duty on grounds of commonality in global humanity to take up the case of Southern Cameroons. And an opportunity had presented itself through the maritime and land boundary case that Cameroon brought against Nigeria. So when we secured this, the idea was to bring an interpleader in the course of that case in the International Court of Justice that, hey, we are even arguing about this Bakassi area. Let us first of all listen to Southern Cameroon, because Southern Cameroon is the real owner of the Bakassi area. Because as far back as 1961, this Southern Cameroon had its independence conditioned on joining either Nigeria or the Republic of Cameroon. And the boundaries were well defined. So within that Bakassi area going up, there is a point at which right to the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, Cameroon does not share a boundary with Nigeria. Cameroon shares a boundary, an eastern boundary with Southern Cameroon, and Nigeria shares a boundary with a western boundary with Southern Cameroon. So Cameroon cannot jump and claim that they share a boundary with Nigeria without showing a subsisting act of union that had adjusted its boundary and brought the boundary now to be the western boundary of Southern Cameroon.
Okay, there are two problems there, okay? Mm-hmm. One is that we have agreed that there was an international conspiracy to...
Now, it's going to come to that. Yeah, go ahead.
No, there was an international conspiracy. To liquidate Southern Cameroon.
Southern Cameroon, yes.
So Southern Cameroon was tucked into La Republique, and they had their independence by attacking on the independence of La Republique. So
exactly.
And so that, don't you think that extended the boundaries of La Republique to a maritime boundary with Nigeria?
That conspiracy was not, it did not get packaged in a legal instrument.
Okay.
That is, in fact, if I were a consultant to the conspirators, I would say you fail, because there was no act of union. So the conspiracy never eventually got cloth with legality. And it never obtained legitimacy, because from day one, in spite of the oppression, the suppression, as has been manifested recently, Southern Cameroonians have never had a split second that they have never rejected their assimilation.
Then the second question though.
Yes.
Don't you think the people of Southern Cameroon going to Nigeria for the interpleader or any type of support contradicts Nigerian interest? Because Nigeria absorbed Northern Cameroons. So if you're trying to cover Southern Cameroons with the help of Nigeria, what prevents Nigeria? Don't you think Nigeria looks at Northern Cameroon like, no, that's part of it that we kept? Don't you see? Are you seeing what I'm saying?
I get your point. Let me tell you this. The Northern Cameroon issue was a long settled issue as far back as 1963. Because Ahidjo took Britain to the International Court of Justice that they manipulated and took Northern Cameroons. And the case did not go through. under international law, even within national law, there's what you call res judicata. That is, the matter has been definitively settled in court and cannot be reopened. So the question of Northern Cameroon does not in any way haunt the case of Southern Cameroon. We could have chosen Ghana. We could have chosen Ghana. But the opportunity, the singular opportunity that presented itself was the maritime and land boundary case that the Republic of Cameroon had introduced. So we were setting our sail to catch the wind that was blowing at the time.
Okay, and I think, let me add this to it, okay? And I also then think that because Cameroon lost the case of reclaiming, I use reclaiming because that's what they claim.
Yeah.
That they're reclaiming their German territory.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they lost that case also means that there was no German territory to be reclaimed anyway, including Southern Cameroon.
Perfect argument. In fact, the legal interpretation of finality of Northern Cameroon becoming part of Nigeria presupposes that the liquidation and dissipation of German colonial territories in Africa was nothing that could be gone back to. And in the same token, Southern Cameroon could not suffer an argument that could not work in Northern Cameroon.
Thank you. I really did not want to go into this deep international part of it, but you really can talk about this without going into that. I really want.
No, it's very important because the fate of Southern Cameroon's, the fate of Southern Cameroon's independence having been compromised through international conspiracy, which led to manipulation of ground politicians, is essentially the fact that decolonization remained a farce. Because if you look at even the case of the Republic of Cameroon, which is said to have become independent, look at the under the table agreement,
the cooperation agreement.
The cooperation agreement. And that could only have been secured with a government operating the Gaullist constitution, where the president of the republic is more than an emperor. Because the president of the republic signed that agreement. In fact, Charles Asale, who was prime minister, who was more educated and was shoved aside in order to put a primary school leaver, Amadou Ahidjo, he could have argued against that agreement. And perhaps that's the reason why they shoved him aside and got Ahidjo, who insipidly signed that agreement. You will not believe that until the 70s, some of the ministerial blocks in Cameroon, built with Cameroon money, the Cameroon government was paying rents to the French government for buildings in Cameroon built by Cameroonians with Cameroonian resources. They were paying rents to France. So the point here is clearly that, unlike the cooperation agreement that sold the economy, the military independence, I mean virtually everything, Cameroon, the Republic of Cameroon, is a mere robot cloth like an independent person, remotely controlled from Champs-Élysées. This is where the difference comes in, because the British, by using the indirect rule system, they adopted our traditional governance system and worked in partnership with them to develop a system. So there was a level of genuine ownership of our governance process by the Southern Cameroonians. And this is why La République du Cameroon could not secure in the independence of Southern Cameroon conspiracy the sort of cooperation agreement that they secured from Ahidjo.
So basically, and I want to conclude this international part of it. So
okay.
Basically, the case of Southern Cameroon now is still that of decolonization.
Absolutely, because France sought from the beginning until today, and is hoping that it would do it tomorrow, which is an impossibility, to colonize Southern Cameroon with the mask of the Republic of Cameroon.
Let me ask you though, it took the British maybe 47 years to turn Southern Cameroons into Anglophones, if you use that word. But it's taken 56 years and Southern Cameroons are not yet Francophones, and I think that seems to be what they're pushing right now. Can you explain why were the British so effective and the French have not been that successful?
The British operated first by recognition and respect of our traditional African institutions and values. You know the role of the local chiefs in the indirect rule system, collection of taxes and so on. So people were not ripped off from what they were used to. But in the French Cameroon, there was a mixture of destruction and falsehood. There was the practice of cantonnement.
No, but that's not what I'm asking, though.
I know exactly what you're asking.
Okay.
Because I'm explaining to you the methodology of the Brits in Southern Cameroon provided an acculturation that fed both from autochthonous traditional African institutional values in Southern Cameroon and the foreign British values that gave a blend, a coexistence that grew to develop a reflex of mutual appreciation and adoption, and thus made it sustainable. The French policy of assimilation deceived the emergent elite that they were now Frenchmen when they will never be. And for the non-elite, they treated them like animals who could be moved from one staple to another. So in the cantonnement principle, they could come and uproot Bamileke people from Bamileke land and go and implant them in Gaoundéré and create a community for them, a canton. And their chiefs were not like our own chiefs. They would gather a group of people even without commonality of values and put them together and then say that you should elect your chief. And that's your local chief. So they did a brutal destruction of the traditional African institutions completely, and then replaced them with fake institutions that could not blend. And with the total weakening of the traditional African institutions, the East Cameroonians, the citizens of La République du Cameroon, lived in the gray area of the falsehood that they are Africans and they are also Europeans in terms of citizenship, which is a falsehood that just turns them into political robots, and they take hook, line, and sinker whatever is dictated from France. That is different, because just as God gave man free will and allowed good and bad to coexist, but man had the opportunity of making the choice between good and bad. The British taught us what are the good values, and we could pick and choose. And we chose the values of the Brits that blended well with our system. For example, under traditional law, before the British came, if I marry a woman and I don't have a child with her, you take the woman afterwards and you deliver a child with that woman, Traditional law said that until you return the dowry that I paid on that woman, that child is my own. But which is against the principles of natural justice, equity, and good conscience. And the Brits are the ones who taught us, and we saw reason in it. And then we dropped our traditional practice and adopted that higher ethical value in terms of parenthood.
Okay, that's beautiful. The question I asked you is, why is it that the British were able to come and make Southern Cameroonians become Anglophones, but the French and the citizens of La République, even with this conspiracy that you just talked about, have not been able, because from your resistance today and the teachers' resistance is resisting something new into what has been...
No, that was exactly going to be my concluding point.
Okay.
I was going to say that because the process of political, particularly ethical acculturation in Southern Cameroon through the contact with the Brits gave birth to a sustainable hybrid culture. Meanwhile, the one in East Cameroon was imperfect grafting, and they still rely on it. They cannot use it on us because the culture blend that has emerged in Southern Cameroon is the hardest cultural crystal you can think of. No hammer has yet been designed that can crush it. And they are operating from the premise of how they cowed citizens of La République du Cameroon and put them in limbo of neither being Africans nor Frenchmen. And that is why up to today a good chunk of the operations of government is to oppress the East Cameroonians. And one of the biggest dangers is that Southern Cameroon, with this resilient hybrid culture, being with La République du Cameroon, if you don't wipe out that culture, which is impossible to wipe out, it will infect the East Cameroonians, and you will have a resistance that will match the number of years those people have been oppressed.
That's a very good transition into another question I want to ask you.
Yeah.
Let me start by asking, what is the difference between civil law and common law? Can you explain that to us?
Common law is essentially rules for regulation of human conduct in society that can be said to have emerged historically from the common conscience of the society. And it is tapped from the past decisions of judges who reflect, when cases come to them, on what decision will match the good sense of justice. And when these decisions have been tested over time, they now provide the rule of law from their consistency. In fact, in law review and law reform, these principles that have emerged from the reflection of judges are streamlined into statute, which eventually go through the cycle all over of interpretation of judges. This is different from civil law. Civil law is a top-down process. The ruler dictates that this is how you have to behave in various circumstances. And everything is codified. That is, there is a projection into what kind of conduct is likely to be from human beings in society, and how it can be violated, and what rule should regulate it. So it is more a question of prefabrication that lends itself to mechanical operation, as opposed to the common law that has inbuilt in it a dynamism that permits it to constantly adjust and fit to the emergent mores of the society as society advances.
Okay. So, being a lawyer who practiced in the common law system, and you're fighting the imposition of civil law and judges into that, tell me what the experience is. Tell me what experience is it that you're fighting right now? What has been your experience within the time that they're trying to do?
Let me give you a very simple example. In almost every common law jurisdiction, the respect for the institution of the law is non-negotiable. In fact, historically, the courts have been referred to, and even to these modern times, they are still referred to as the temple of justice. So there is a certain serenity with which the courts are treated. Now, with the civil law system, the courts don't have that kind of respect, because the presence of the executive and the centrality of power from the presidency is so overwhelming that the judge who presides over cases and has the yam and the knife in deciding a case in the civil law system is actually the lesser of the officials of the court, which is the contrary in common law jurisdiction. Because when the chief justice, when the justice who is presiding over a case is looked upon as the ultimate, is looked upon as the embodiment of the law. In fact, there is this saying that the law is written on the breast of the judge. But in the common law, the stronger person is the attorney, the state attorney. And it is so ridiculous that we have a recent example in our present struggle. And this explains why they arrest our people from the common law jurisdiction and they ship them over to the civil law jurisdiction to be tried. Because the kind of things that happen in the civil law jurisdiction can never happen in the common law jurisdiction. Right from Magna Carta, the right to fair hearing is uncompromisable in common law jurisdiction. But in the civil law jurisdiction, what reigns supreme is the wishes of the executive. I'm sure people in the civil law jurisdiction might not be shocked, but the whole common law world is shocked that the judge of the High Court of Fundi will listen to an application for habeas corpus by Mr. Aya Paul, a Deputy Attorney General of the Supreme Court of Cameroon, and finds that the decision has to go in favor of the applicant. But the Minister of Justice, who is not a presiding magistrate, summons him and tells him, you cannot do that because the presidency wants this. We common law lawyers may be shocked, but that is normality as far as civil law jurisdiction is concerned. And to any civilized system, it is an aberration of justice that the dictates of the executive can overrule the decisions of the court. Meanwhile, the whole essence of checks and balance in a democratic system is that the executive, like the legislature, is ultimately checked by the judiciary. But when the judiciary is under the rule of thumb of the executive, then you know all is lost as far as access to justice is concerned.
So under the common law, you can have that division?
Over the common law, you have access to justice, and the integrity of justice is supreme. But under civil law, the dictates of the executive override the integrity of justice from the courts.
Okay, that explains to me the culture and also the level of separation.
Yeah.
But I want to hear what happens in the courtroom where the judge is a civil law judge speaking French, and the attorney is a common law attorney, and the defendant is English speaking in the Southern Cameroon. Tell me what obtains in the Southern Cameroon courts now.
In fact, I'll give you an example of the Court of Appeal in the Northwest region, in Bamenda. Here we are, most of the civil law magistrates, because they just call all of them magistrates, and those who are working in the Attorney General's office are called the magistrat debout. That's the magistrate who stands up to do his job, like an attorney arguing the case. Meanwhile, the judge is like a magistrat assis. This is what obtains. There we had most of them in the legal department. First thing, they don't have respect for the court. From their dressing and the way they enter the court. One day we were shocked. The door that the presiding judge sits and backs is exclusive to judges. That's the presiding judges. Here comes a magistrate from the legal department. The judges are all seated. He walks in through the judge's door and he's chewing his gum. There was total uproar, because it means that he has no respect even for the people he is supposed to bow to. Next thing is, the guy doesn't know the rules of common law, even the ones that they have imperfectly adopted in the criminal procedure code. He does not know how to articulate them. Worse is that he comes to court and writes his submissions in French and wants to address the court in French. But access to justice requires that the person who is standing trial must have effective communication from the court. And the court is not just the judges, it is the entire personnel, including the barristers and solicitors of the private bar. So when an attorney from the legal department comes and is addressing in French in a common law jurisdiction and in an English-speaking sector, what is he expecting? When we cross over there, when we have clients and we cross over to the French jurisdiction, we are not expected to speak in English. We are expected to speak in French. In fact, most of the time, the judge or the state council will ask, "Qu'est-ce qu'il raconte? What is he ranting about?" Why is it that they think we should adjust when we get over to the civil law jurisdiction? Meanwhile, they don't have to. That is colonization par excellence. In fact, every francophone child is a house slave in the postmodern colonization of Southern Cameroon. And, this completely distorts access to justice. And the legal department does not even concentrate on doing cases operates as a spy network, reporting fellow magistrates to the Minister of Justice that this one like this is frustrating our plan to get French or civil law implanted here. In fact, before we had the inaugural conference, we rose up against an Attorney General who recklessly announced that very soon we will not be talking about common law in the Northwest and in the Southwest. When we demonstrated, they withdrew him and sent a common law Attorney General to us. They withdrew him and sent him down there. But in the Southwest, the Attorney General is Francophone. And but for one or two Anglophones, the rest of the Attorney General's office is Francophone. In the State Council, that's the lower legal department that takes care of the Court of First Instance and the High Court in Boya. There are 9 magistrates in that department. It is only the State Council herself who is an Anglophone trained magistrate from Southern Cameroon. The rest, they come to court with French-English dictionary. I had a case which I did in the Court of First Instance in Limbe, in Victoria. The young man was completely operating as if he was in the civil law jurisdiction, and very arrogantly, to the extent that he told some people that his mother is a judge of the Supreme Court and he can have his way. Until some of our Anglophone magistrates are scared of him, that he can frustrate their career. So the state terrorism at every level, from the court to the ministerial departments and so on, is corrosive.
So what does that do to justice, though? I'm still...
No, it frustrates justice. There's no justice. In fact, what it does is that it fertilizes bribery and corruption. The only way you can get justice your way, if you are right, you must spend more money than the person who has wronged you. If you are wrong and the person you have wronged is wretched, you buy the justice and put it in your pocket. That's why judicial corruption is one of the worst in Cameroon. Inclusive, especially in Southern Cameroon, because disempowering us, in fact, bribery is an instrument of disempowering Southern Cameroonians.
Now, you may have answered this question, but let me, what is that you sent to the Constitutional Court? What was it that you wanted the Constitutional Court to decide?
That was a petition asking the Constitutional... In fact, I traced the history of independence of Southern Cameroon from the perspective of how we came to adopt, cherish, and maintain the common law. And I took it right to the level of our inaugural conference and stated that we would want those values which we cherish to be restored, because they are grounded in the constitutional foundation of the constitutional foundation of the Constitutional Order in Council of Southern Cameroon, which derives its own legality and legitimacy from the trusteeship agreement. Meanwhile, the experiment, the pretensions, which I characterize as an experiment to develop a constitutional foundation for the union of Southern Cameroon and La République du Cameroon, was suspended. And here I can cite the publication of late N. Bile, that the Fumban conference never came out with a conclusion. It was suspended for further discussion. And that further discussion never came to be. And we have read Pafuncha's apologetic publication to the United Nations, which clearly state that the bad faith of Ahijo, representing the Republic of Cameroon, now dawned on him when, far from establishing a constitutional foundation which would have been the only act of union between Southern Cameroon and the Republic of Cameroon, he only proceeded to erode every institution and project of Southern Cameroon. On this account, I pose the question that, we, SCNC, SCAPO, they've been arguing that there's no act of union. We too are arguing that there's no act of union. That is why we say that they should go back to that experiment and provide us that act of union, if it does exist, so that the restoration of the common law system and its values could be anchored on it to assure sustainability.
Okay.
Failing which it will be clear to the world from the decision of the Constitutional Council that there has never been an act of union. And Southern Cameroonians should now be given an opportunity for determination of whether they want to have that act of union established and go along with a federal institution, or from the horrific experience fueled by trickery that they have experienced so far, they could just go their quiet way, since there's nothing binding them.
Okay, so I just want you to, I know you're not a teacher, but I want you to give us a quick experience of what the teachers are also experiencing in their own situation with La République du Cameroun.
Well, you may be making a mistake that I'm not a teacher. I've taught in primary school, secondary school, and university. So I'm a full-blown teacher. Just for the joke, anyway. The problem of the teachers, represented by Teachers Association of Cameroon and the Cameroon Teachers Trade Union, CATU. In fact, it's important to note that TAC, Teachers Association of Cameroon, came to being before CATU. And all they sought to protect was the Anglo-Saxon education subsystem. Because that's the system we adopted from the English people, adapted it to our peculiar circumstances, and sustained them. The number of years you spend in primary school, the number of years you spend in secondary school, what exam you write, and so on and so forth. All along, the government of the Republic of Cameroon has attempted to wipe out the GCE. They have modeled up our primary education ever so often. So this time around, the negotiations of the teachers' trade unions were to secure recognition and respect, and also secure guarantee for sustainability of the Anglo-Saxon education subsystem. The government continually remained unreliable. They will discuss and say, okay, yes, we're going to do this. But the next minute you find them backpedaling. Even our universities. They created an Anglo-Saxon university in Boya. They flooded it with our students, with their students, Francophones, who come and they cannot follow lectures in English. That now justifies flooding the university with Francophone lecturers and putting the Anglophone students at disadvantage. The same thing has happened with Bamenda University. The same thing happens with institutions of higher education like École Normale and so on. The professional schools like School of Survey, School of Public Works in Boya, these schools being in the common law, being in the in Southern Cameroon, which is Anglo-Saxon, ought to follow and serve the Southern Cameroonians according to their own educational value system. But they create islands in Southern Cameroon of French educational culture with a view of infecting and dissipating the Anglo-Saxon system. Yet, the elite, the ruling elite, from people like Defin Changa, they know the superior value of Anglo-Saxon education system, and they all send their children to study in Anglo-Saxon schools right in the time of Ahidjo. And when the children had to go to university, they did not send most of them to France. They sent their children to Britain and America. That's why you see people like Antoine Simi who pride themselves, I'm a Chicago boy, because he went to university in Chicago. And he could boast that he's superior to his peers who went to France. So our teachers' trade union with the Parents Association, they fought hard to protect the GCE. And in response to creating a GCE board, a baccalaureate board that never existed was created. So when we fight and gain something, they also give it to people who have not asked for it. The whole thing is that the evolution of the education system in Cameroon, the policy of government that accompanies it, is to destroy the Anglo-Saxon education system and render us less competitive and therefore vulnerable to swallowing a system that our own values reject, and that only subjugates us deeper. This is what the teachers stood for. They had been negotiating for it in the corridors of the Ministry of Secondary and Higher Education, and they were not making a headway. They were only faced with deception after deception, and through bribery and corruption and murder. There is my colleague who was my classmate in Calabar University who was lecturing in Boya University. He was a firebrand in the Anglo-Saxon law teachers, university lecturers syndicate. They cajoled him with appointments, intimidated him with transfers and so on. He stood his ground. In the final analysis, he capitulated and accepted a high position in the Ministry of Higher Education in Yaoundé, and by that he fell to the bait because they simulated an accident and killed him in a car crash. Because either they poison you, they send you on exile, they kill you in a car crash. All these are methods of liquidation of the Anglo-Saxon values. Whether it is in education, it is in law, the method is the same. So these people, the teachers' trade union, when they saw the entry point we had hit and how successful it was, they quickly accepted our invitation to join us. They didn't just come voluntarily, we invited them. We worked on their minds. But in fairness to the Council of Anglo-Saxon Education, they realized the need for legal advice. So they invited me, and I was a signatory on behalf of the Common Law Council, to the memorandum of understanding that we should work together. But when we started our strike, we had to work on the minds of the leaders of the trade union to join us. And they joined us, and it had positive effect, because when we called for an indefinite strike and they joined us and called for an indefinite strike, they went further to say that children should not go to school as teachers are not going to school. And you know, the population of students, the population of teachers, it just added fuel to the fire that was propelling the strike. And that ignited in the general population an interest to follow the trailblazers. And that's how the government of Cameroon is still dazed up to this moment. How a little thing that lawyers started could be sustained with empty stomach for this length of time. It's running to 5 months now. But like Christians do it. If you want your prayers to have full effect, for God's graces to visit you, you do fasting. And that's why I've described the strike as a fasting by teachers, lawyers, and all others involved, which is the investment for purification of Southern Cameroon territory and its restoration to a never to be compromised independence.
Wow, first of all, what you've described as happening to Southern Cameroon is what I will call old-time colonization in the 21st century. And the resistance you are mentioning is therefore a fight against colonization.
Nothing less than that. In fact, the first time the Caucasians conceived colonization as an instrument of subjugation of other races, in that its crudest form, that's exactly what is happening now. And you know, it's not like, in fact, I call it blue collar colonization as opposed to white collar colonization, if we may make that distinction. Because, you know, the modern colonization, like getting people with master's degree and so on, they don't have access to middle class jobs. They are doing security in Britain here and so on. That is kind of refined. But the crude one, where you denature a man from his philosophy about himself and you ask him to adopt a different identity for himself, it's like we are in the Stone Age.
Okay, so here's a situation that obtains now.
Yeah.
So there's this colonization that has gone on for over 55 years.
Right.
The lawyers have provided very superior resistance to it.
Yes.
The teachers came in, that's the educated class of Southern Cameroonians, and the masses, if you want to put it that way, have followed. So, and you say it's about 5 months now.
Yeah. I mean, take it from November.
Yes, take it from November.
December, you know, we are now about 5 months.
Yes. So the question, so I think obviously the colonizer I want to say playing for time. I want to now move into how the people of Southern Cameroon proceed.
That's right. What's the way forward?
Yes, what's the way forward? Because the lawyers have provided very excellent leadership. Same with the teachers, with a very good resistance. I think the resistance is still holding.
Yeah.
So can you give me a sense of the way forward? So let me just say, how do the people of Southern Cameroon, because I think, and you just clarified that they are looking for their restoration now.
Yeah.
So how do we proceed from here?
The way to proceed, there are two immediate things we need to do. We need, in order to exploit the current momentum and produce the desired result, that is restoration of independent statehood of Southern Cameroon, within the shortest possible time, we need, as a precondition, to establish a unique strategic plan for the deconstruction of the colonial gains that was built over a period of more than 55 years, and its replacement within a restored Southern Cameroon of a viable and sustainable democratic and progressive society in every dimension. To be able to do this, we need absolutely, when I say absolutely, I mean every letter in that word as it sounds. We need organization. Because in terms of resources, the Southern Cameroons is overly blessed with human resources to be able to transform Southern Cameroons upon restoration within a period of less than 10 years into a country outside, positively speaking, outside the developing countries. Why do I say this? While we give respect to each and every movement's contribution, I do not subscribe to the theory of fluid unity. A revolution does not provide a platform for competition, because competition in this time will lead to attrition, which will not easily lead to the emergence of a strong singular force to lead us to restoration and rehabilitation of the Southern Cameroon state. We have seen in this less than 5 months, in these 5 months, I wanted to say, what earlier movements were not able to secure, and we are not blaming them. They did not secure it because the envelope of fear cast over Southern Cameroon was not yet broken in the way that the lawyers and teachers have broken it. SCNC emerged in 1993 out of the Cameroon Anglophone Conference, the All Anglophone Conference. But the tactic of the colonial master from Yaoundé easily led to splinters of Southern Cameroon movements that engage in fighting for restoration of Southern Cameroon independence. The entry point struck by lawyers and joined by teachers brought these organizations that have been losing energy in between themselves to reason, and they quickly rallied, in all fairness to them, that we should work together. The timing initially was not very right, but subsequently we saw that the consortium had brought civil society organizations together. Unfortunately, exactly what happened with the All Anglophone Conference that gave birth to the SCNC eventually started visiting the consortium. While the consortium took off as a come together of various Southern Cameroon's civil society organizations and not Southern Cameroon's individuals, I must emphasize. The individuals representing these organizations very quickly started forgetting their representative capacity, and the undemocratic practice of leaders operating without referral to their organization and without respecting the democratic process of member organizations coming together and taking decisions led to a lot of elbowing and positioning, which has ultimately operated a disservice by injecting mistrust. Nevertheless, the commitment of the grassroots that has been so unalloyed has sustained this struggle in spite of these little cracks up to this point. The initial schisms that emerged from what I have just exposed were handled in-house, and it was agreed that we now move on the proper principles and procedures. When they have started arresting leadership of the consortium, those who came over, when left the Republic of Cameroon territory, or who fled abroad, the misfortune of thinking that we could still break by using just the mask of the consortium continued. In fact, the leadership of the consortium now in Nigeria, which signed up for SCACUF, would have humbly done it on behalf of the leaders in jail, or do it on behalf of the consortium after consultation, even if they cannot meet and discuss. But the fact that the leadership in jail in Yaoundé unilaterally transferred the authority, the governing authority, to compatriots who did not belong to any constituent organization of the consortium, notwithstanding the incredible work they had been doing in relaying information about the activities from the territory to the outer world, was unconstitutional. And when once something is wrong, it is not necessarily cured by the good things it brings. If a thief steals something and gives you, and you know that it is a thief who has stolen it, that might be too extreme, but a stolen good remains a stolen good no matter how many times it changes hands. An unconstitutional act like the leader of an organization transferring power unconstitutionally cannot, by legitimation, become constitutional. And that hounds the cohesion in the consortium, the exclusion of people. But I think these are teething problems in a revolution that can be handled. The other aspect is that some people have a belief that what the consortium has managed, which is very respectable, gives the authority to the consortium to continue to be in leadership position, which I agree with. But they say a house divided against itself cannot stand. If the consortium cannot maintain its internal cohesion, they give room to those who are not in the consortium, instead of perfectly collaborating with them, to have doubts, and that weakens the revolution. Today, the existing organizations like Ambazonian Governing Council, SCYL, SCNC, they have breathed new force. But notwithstanding that, these platforms for the struggle for the independent statehood of Southern Cameroon cannot operate in fluid collaborations and produce the required results. The only way is that they can continue to do their own activities by concentrating on what best they can handle. But in doing this, they must, either from that collaboration or otherwise, be established for this revolution a central authority to run this revolution. Take, for example, fundraising. The interim leaders of the consortium have registered the consortium as a not-for-profit organization here, against the background of having chastised the Southern Cameroon communities in Minnesota for using the name consortium as if it was constructed in the dictionary to be used only by them. And in that chastisement, it was said that the consortium was set up in Cameroon. Even though it has been banned, it remained relevant in Cameroon and can never be registered outside. Today, we have it registered here. Elbowing and positioning par excellence. So there's a confusion now in the minds of Southern Cameroonians who are willing and capable to support the struggle as one people. When the consortium now comes and asks for funds, Maurice comes and asks for funds, the actionable group comes and asks, SCNC is asking. Skakov. What do we end up with? Especially when the evil called money is not centrally managed. We will go back to the situation in the Garden of Eden where we will start blaming the snake for having caused the problem. But we need to identify those people with leadership qualities and get them to take the responsibility of putting aright the management and direction of this revolution.
Okay, I do appreciate all of what you just said. But here's a problem I have. Mm-hmm. The lawyers and the teachers came and told the people of Southern Cameroon, we have a problem we want to solve, and we're glad you've joined us. And what I see happening is not, what I see happening now is that these people have suddenly been left in limbo, and they are observing ghost towns, and there's no way forward. What you just explained to me is an internal debate. But the two problems which could take the people of Southern Cameroon right back, even worse than where they were. In that, as you are having these strategies and planning, and then these internal quarrels, La Republique is doing its job on the people of Southern Cameroon, and nature itself is doing its job on the people of Southern Cameroon who are not functioning properly, are in a state of assault, and also in a state where they are like midstream, and there's no direction coming from anyone on what next to do, and they cannot continue to sustain. So the lawyers and the teachers who move this thing forward seem to be failing, and I say seem because I'm being nice. But the people of Southern Cameroon are now midstream, and they need the next move, because if you stay put, then you can be targeted.
No, I can tell you that you don't need to be apologetic. In fact, the lawyers and teachers are frustrating the aspirations of the people of Southern Cameroon, and they need to re-evaluate themselves and give an account of the leadership that they put out. They held themselves out as leaders. They need to give an account of that. But I can tell you also that there has been a mutation of the center of control of this revolution. It is no longer a business of the teachers and lawyers. Every Southern Cameroonian has a responsibility to ensure that the in-house squabbles are fixed, and then we go out for proper direction. Because we cannot approach the United Nations with our diplomatic offensive or any state government in disparate ranks. We cannot raise funds to fuel the struggle in disparate ranks. So there is a heavy responsibility on each and every Southern Cameroonian, not to simply say that, okay, let us just operate loosely. We have to have the direction. And the way to have the direction is that when you have a strategic plan, and the strategic plan must not be something that will be debated in parliament and agreed upon. A few good men can come up with the direction. The minds of the Southern Cameroonians are so fertile now that when you put a good plan and you bring out a perspective of leadership, they will buy it.
Okay, let me proceed by saying this. Okay, I have listened to you, and you have been very central and very key in bringing the teachers and the lawyers to where we are now.
Yep.
I think anybody listening to this now will want to know, what were your plans when you were moving all this, and what, because I think they think that you have a responsibility in continuing what you started.
Yeah.
So what do you tell them?
There is no general without an army. And what you have referred to as internal squabbles shows that the army of which I started off as a part is now a competition without rules collection of Southern Cameroonians. But the blessing is that every Southern Cameroonian, particularly in the diaspora, have their heads and hearts in success, and success at the fastest possible route. I do not, because of my penchants for operating with democratic rules also believe that in a revolution you can overstretch the employment of democratic rules. But you must at least do the minimal of consultation. I know for certain my voice is being listened to, would be listened to within the territory and even in the diaspora, apart from a few detractors. I am carrying out consultations across the board, and in due course, within the shortest possible time, I'll be able to put up a team that would decide on leadership. It could be me, it could be somebody and myself, it could be a team, but rest assured, that team is on its way to the stage to give direction. For one thing, the moment you do it right, the Southern Cameroonians will queue up behind you because they are not interested so much into the, as to who or the specific process, but who can deliver and deliver fast. The team I am telling you that I'm interested in putting together will come up with the agenda, will develop the projects within the shortest possible time, and it will not be long. This revolution will be on autopilot because the leadership will emerge without apology. All we insist on is that while the population will provide the fueling support, the people who have their various organizations will easily come to recognition of the fact that the central authority is what will make the difference.
I have two groups of questions for you.
Yep.
One, while all these things are sorting themselves out, including you, sorting and putting a team, like you said, I want you to give an instruction to the people of Southern Cameroons. What should they be doing now while all of this is being sorted out?
The people of Southern Cameroon, your objective is more than crystal clear. What you should do is to realize that legally and legitimately, it is you, the people of Southern Cameroonians, who should determine how this revolution should continue, not that private individuals should determine it for you. You have the capacity to discern. You must make sure that you move ahead to support those who will come up to offer central authority and direction. And we must educate ourselves against the idea of sharing the booty because there's no booty. After restoration, there's a long haul for reconstruction. So while you save money, you also identify amongst yourself the resources, the human resources that we have. If we are going to develop a good health system, the first questions we have to answer are, who are the medics? Are we going to get Copperans from France and Peace Corps from America? No, we have our own. But who are they? In every community in the diaspora, we need to identify these resources in all the areas of engagement and begin to harness them. The other thing we need to do is that we need to take cognizance that there could be burnout on the ground. And the consequences of burnout by way of backlash is something we cannot fathom. So we must think strategically how best to sustain the resistance on the ground.
All right. So what I gather from that is that the people should do all they can or rely on whoever can keep this thing going while some sorting out is being done abroad, because that's where you are and that's where most of the other activities are. Because obviously those who are on the ground have been captured, thrown in jail, and the only free leaders are those who have actually left the theater of play.
No, if I might be very, very precise, with the disruption of organization, the banning of all lawyers association, banning of consortium and so on, the responsibility has fallen squarely on those of us who are in the diaspora now, inclusive of those who fled the country and are in the diaspora, to quickly organize ourselves and give temporary leadership to the restoration of Southern Cameroon. And upon the restoration, we will have a transitional period.
Now, I'm not going to the restoration yet. Let me just stop you there.
Okay.
I just wanted to conclude because I had two.
Yeah, okay.
One, what should the people on the ground be doing now while we're doing all this sorting out abroad?
Okay.
And like I just said, I gathered that you're saying they need to maintain the momentum. They need to, and I'm suspecting that the only way they can do it is by their own means or their own creativity. So
their own creativity and psychological and material support from the diaspora.
Okay.
Yes.
The second is that I just wanted to ask you, and I'm going to ask this based on an assumption that I make, and you can make a statement about the assumption or not.
It's okay.
The consortium has been very effective in getting people up to a point. It is my estimation that it's stalled. And let me tell you why I think it's stalled. It's stalled because they are beginning to now, or some of them are beginning to now talk about things that I know have been tried. I hear there's a big thing that being pushed about. They want to file a law case against La Republic, and they want people to contribute money for a law firm. And I think it's a stalling tactic because Gojidinka has almost exhausted all of that. I know Pamukong did some of that and was compensated personally. Scapo did that. So I personally don't see our struggle as being solved through a court because. But let me just ask you. First of all, do you agree that there's? I think you've already admitted that there's some stalled situation happening right now. Am I correct?
Very correct.
Okay. If that's the case, then what do you think about our liberation coming through a law court? Is that feasible? Is that a best? Is that a way of spending our resources?
I think about 70 to 75% of where we need to invest is organization and maintenance of the resistance within the territory. The law courts, mind you, as a lawyer I can tell you, the petitioner in any case, or the plaintiff, you don't determine the speed at which a case will end when you start it. Because the defendant can always come up with his own gymnastics to delay while he is crushing the people on the ground. A lawsuit, first of all, that is contemplated against the background of not recognizing that Southern Cameroonians have the resources. No doubt, there could be a collaboration between Southern Cameroonian lawyers and the foreign lawyers. But when you take off, like, you doubt what you yourself you can offer, and you hand yourself over to a foreign law firm, the leverage for compromise with your opponent is clear. If you give $75,000 and this is contributed from $10 amongst the Southern Cameroonians in the diaspora, this law firm is in business. If Bia and his government come and give them $300,000, they don't even need to overtly abandon their case. They could just make a few errors. Bia doesn't even need to come there. They could mess you up at any level. So, the lawsuit is not a chemical process that you can say is going to dissolve the subjugation of Southern Cameroonians. They might be habilitated to doing lobbying. But let me tell you, my experience is this. No amount of lobbying will produce results if La République du Cameroon succeeds in crushing the revolution within the territory and compromising, because they will easily mount people who will come and say, man, who gave authority to these people? We don't have a problem. Then both you, the protagonist of a foreign law firm, and the law firm, they get embarrassed that you are negotiating for a people who are neither here nor there. So I would advise that we invest in the health care of the people in the territory as an emergency measure. While children are not going to school, we should at least do some community engagement in developing a lost reading culture. They should get the children at every level to be reading, because that is another method of acquiring knowledge. From a social perspective, particularly for the teachers of the lay and Christian private education institution whose salaries have been stopped because La République du Cameroon is not yet at the point where they are ready to take the risk to stop the salaries of the government teachers. Various Southern Cameroonians here or families should adopt teachers in their community. I need to inform you that I visited a Sok community or a Bui community, and they were already mooting the idea. Somebody from Menchum Division was already mooting the idea. So we need to identify our local community here and create the partnership with the people on the ground to give some little sustenance. Maybe you don't have to give too much money. When it is farming season, you provide seeds and tools to those teachers so that they can continue to sustain life and keep the resistance. But obviously, we need to be able to avoid La République du Cameroon ever bringing back the internet. We need to work with our own scientists and have alternative access to internet because it is possible.
Okay, let me ask you, it's a personal question.
Yeah.
What makes you decide to take this risk instead of benefiting from your education, providing your family the kind of life that your education can get for them, what makes you get into this very risky business, which has the potential? And I don't think that you're surprised by what happened to you that finds you abroad. What drives you to take all this risk and end up with your wealth, your family, your friends back there, and you floating around the world? What motivates you?
You see, there's one thing that a lot of people take for granted, which I would say, luckily for me, I don't take for granted. My identity is very important to me. And if my identity is a solution to move away from subjugation by another set of human beings, it is a worthwhile engagement. I was born in southern Cameroon, and southern Cameroon never became independent till today. So I'm essentially a stateless person. My engagement, therefore, is fueled by the fact that I want, through the pathways of restoring southern Cameroon, to restore my personal identity, and to have taken the responsibility of marrying and bringing forth my children. I have an obligation to give them what I have not had. They must have an identity. Besides, to have succeeded to be alive till today with the occupation of southern Cameroon by La République du Cameroun is a mystery. And that mystery, I call it a blessing from God. And as a Christian, I am taught that when you are blessed, you bless other people. Because if you recall what Alexander the Great said about vanity, you will realize that the latent achievement we have in this world is how much you have sacrificed and impacted on the life of others. I think when I lie in my tomb tomorrow, I will lie more in peace, not because of the number of houses and cars and women that I had, but more because I contributed in my own little way to bring peace and recognition to a segment of humanity called Southern Cameroonians. It's all a question of value system. My value is investing in humanity and not investing in acquisition of wealth, which is what I could have had if I decided to compromise and stay in Cameroon and go along with the Cameroon government. And for your information, on 2 occasions, before even we came to this point of this strike, way back in the 2000 and 2010, the Cameroon government has sent people behind me to recruit me into becoming part of the government. And it's very tempting because a minister can have a salary of 500, 600 or 800,000 francs. But his running budget, from every indication, is more than 2 million francs per month. What does that do? It physically enriches you, but spiritually it indebts you to the point where If people die and come back here to serve their sentence for having committed sins, you could come back here like a dog that belongs to a hunter that never sees even the bone of the meat that they hunt. I want to go back to God and stay with Him. I don't want to go and come back here for punishment.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a very tough question. Given your knowledge of the history, given your knowledge of the practice, given your knowledge of all your experiences in Southern Cameroons, and given some of what we discussed about leadership now, give me a prediction of where you think we will be in the next 5 years. I may even make that easier by asking you, give me a prediction of what you think will happen to the people of Southern Cameroon.
With what I have figured out already in an outline as a strategy for the restoration of Southern Cameroon, which I intend to sell to our compatriots, I see us in the next 5 years sitting on a negotiation table liquidating our relationship with France under the mask of La République du Cameroon. This nation would have been restored. And at that negotiation table, we will be talking reparation for all the atrocities that have been caused in Southern Cameroon for a period of 60 years. We will be building new relationships with genuine friends and engaging in reconstruction of Southern Cameroons. We'll be creating an opportunity of our huge, well-trained population in the diaspora that is putting so much in the development and running of foreign economies. We'll be creating an opportunity for them to come back to their own home and leading a life of freedom that even with their exit from the territory while it was under subjugation, they have never enjoyed. Because whether you become a citizen of a foreign land, your freedom that ignites the blossoming of the best qualities in you with which you were endowed when your Creator made you can only happen within your own territory, even if you are sitting on a wheelchair and advising young people. So I see the next 5 years as that darkest period before daybreak, but it is the end of the tunnel, and light will shine into the tunnel as we arise as an independent people once more, or for once.
Thank you.
You're welcome.